All right, it's Richard White here again. I haven't put up a video for a while, so I'm going to put up one on how to tie this particular fly that really came about kind of as an accident, but it turned out to be very effective. I caught my nicest fish up on a trip at the end of June, beginning of July, up to northern Maine. It was a nice but not huge lake trout caught on this fly, and as I said, it came about really very much as an accident. I had sat down to tie a fly I've tied many times before, which would be a Mickey fin, and I got started tying a Mickey fin and realized I hadn't been paying very close attention, and instead of grabbing red bucktail, I had grabbed orange, and then I had started tying it in the wrong order, doing orange, yellow, orange rather than yellow, red, yellow. And then rather than discard it, I kept that one and then thought about it and realized the yellow, orange, and black would be very typical for a number of salmon patterns, like the Willie Gunn or some of the Cascades. And so I decided to, I'll try tying a few. And when I was up in Maine, and we were not having much success because it was very hot and very bright sunshine every single day, and so the fish were down deep and really not feeding, the guide took one look at a fly like this one and said, let's try that one, and that's what we got the nicest fish on. So I've decided I should tie a few more and maybe even share how I tie it. It's a very straightforward fly. So let me remove this one from the vise, lay it off to the side, and we'll go through the tying technique. Nothing at all unusual about the technique here. All very standard. So I have here a size 4 streamer hook. This one happens to be a Fulling Mill, 2225. You could tie this in pretty much any size that suits you. You could tie it as small as a 12, start tying size 2s or even larger if you want. Anything in between, what you think is going to work where you're fishing. But obviously, it's an attractor fly. It's bright. It grabs attention. So I'm going to be using orange thread here. This is an 8/0 kind of fluorescent orange. Start my thread about 2 eyes back from the eye. Clip that off. Now the body on this is tied with, rather than the silver of a Mickey fin, with a gold holographic tinsel. This happens to be a large from Vivas. Large because it's going to cover faster. After a while, you learn how much to take. I'm taking, I don't know, what is this, 6 inches or more. And tie this in at the front. Of course, it helps if I can actually catch it. There we go. Catch it on, bind it down. I'm going to fold it back towards the front because I have discovered on some occasions that larger fish with larger teeth sometimes do quite a job on tinsel bodies. They can really shred a tinsel body sometimes. So in order to protect that tinsel body, I'm going to add just a little bit of CA glue. Again, go with whatever you like. This is a thicker version. I'm going to put a decent amount on because I'm going to want some of this to squeeze its way through the first layer of the tinsel body to help connect the second to the first. So I'm going to spread that with a needle, run that through something to get the excess off of my needle. Now I can just wind, trying to go pretty tight, winding this back, and you may be able to see that it actually squeezes some of the crazy glue, some of the super glue through between wraps, which will help hold the next layer down. So it's intentional that it does this. And I see I've got a glob hanging there I'm going to have to deal with in a minute. And that's okay. Now I'm going to come back over it, and since I had squeezed some glue out, this is going to help hold the second layer to the first. So this should be a very durable body on the shank of the fly. I'm going to come back up to where I started, bind that in. I'm a bit of a belt and suspenders person tying, so I'm going to then fold that back and go over it again so that that tinsel isn't going anywhere. Now, since I had a little bit extra crazy glue here, I'm just going to then spread that over the rest, knowing that will dry quickly, and that way I don't have a lot of mess. All right, now, the one thing that I tend to do with streamers is I really prefer, let's see if I can't get this sitting more horizontally. There we go. Oh, come on. I tell you to sit horizontally, you should sit horizontal. Is I almost always tie part of the wing really as a belly. Because otherwise the wing has a tendency to lift away from the body. So, and also the fly tends to swim a little oddly. At least I think so. So I prefer to have part of the, basically have a little bit of belly for the color, and then the rest above. I get them. It's, to me, it looks more fish-like in the water. So now, this is pretty straightforward. We're going to start with orange underneath. So I'm going to get some bucktail, and none of these need to be thick. These are fairly thin. Since I'm going to have 4 batches of bucktail, no one batch should be very thick. So that's what I have originally. Grab about a third of the way from the tips, pull out the real short ones. Then I'm going to go back and see if there are any I would need to kind of even up some more. I'm not worried about perfection here, because most of these are going to smooth out in the water. I then roll them between my fingers to get a better sense of how they're going to sit. If there are some that look too short, I'll go back and pull some of them out. And so I'll just sort of even it up until I like the way they lay. Come back to the tips. And some are still shorter. I'll pull those out. Then I'm going to invert this and get to the length I want. And I find if they're too long, I get too many tail biters back here, so I don't go very far past the hook bend. Now, I prefer, and it's your choice whether you do this or not, to cut them to length to tie them on. I find that's easier than trying to get in and cut off the big butts. So, over my trash can, cut off, and I'll turn it so that I'm looking directly at the underside of the shank. That allows me to be sure of the placement and bind that in tightly. Go all the way forward and back over it. And what I want is I want this to sit. I don't want this to get too far away from the shank of the hook. So I like to make sure that when maybe have somewhat softer turns towards the rear and tighter towards the front, and then these will sit much more in line. I won't have that giant flare. Okay, so orange. Next color is yellow, and everything else goes on the top. So the batch of yellow, about the same diameter as the batch of orange. I'll do the same thing. Come out, pull out the very short ones. And then try to decide what I think of the length. I think that'll be okay. Hold that, use my pinch to mark where I'm going to cut. cut, again, turn it so I'm looking directly down on the shank. Move my thread as far back on the head as I'm going to be tying. It's just, I find you get much better control over binding in this next layer. And since I'm looking directly down on it, I can see if it's canted to one side or not. Bind that down. Come back. That sits nice and flat. Back with another layer of orange. Again, it's close to the same diameter as the last. I tend to tie these a little bit on the sparse side. Some people might want them even sparser. Some people might want much denser pack. Again, your fly, your choice. And there are people who swear by pretty much any variation on that you can imagine. Again, I'm trying to get these lined up to the same length, so the tips line up. Mark it with my thumb and forefinger. Cut. Now, the danger with cutting like that is if it's wrong, you may have wasted some deer hair, some bucktail, but after a while you get pretty good at seeing where you're going to want to put it. Again, I'm going to move the thread back so that I can easily grab onto that bucktail all the way forward, nice and tight, and come back again. And there's my next layer of orange. Now I'm going to go a couple of softer turns before going further forward, and that will help that sit down a little bit better to give me a more streamlined shape. And then the last color is going to be some black bucktail. And again, similar diameter clump to what you've used for every other color. Pull out the short hairs. Pull out a few more. Measure the length. I can see in this case I'm going to want to cut right about here. Excuse me while I go off camera. Try to minimize the amount that ends up on the floor. Why make more work for myself later. Again, make sure this is at the back of where the head's going to be. Then bind down going forward, at least until it is thoroughly in place. Then I can build the orange head starting from the eye, working my way back. And this may take a few wraps, but I want to make sure I get a smooth head, and of course that I thoroughly bind everything down, and that the head will be all orange with none of the black showing through. So I may have to go over this a few times. Thread is not your most expensive part of the fly, so if you need a little extra thread for a streamer anyway, it's not the end of the world. On some dries that may make a big difference, but on streamers you want the smooth head and you want everything to stay where you put it. Alright, so now I'm pretty happy with the coverage. That's well cleaned up. I will bring thread to the back and whip finish. 3, 4, 5. Off. Snug it up. 1, 2, 3, 4 should be enough. Snug it up. Snip. And then it's just a matter of head cement, and here I'm using the Sally Hansen Hard as Nails. Which is my standard. Obviously, whatever you use. Your fly, your choice. So put on the head cement. I'll come back later after that dries and put on at least one more layer. But there you have very simple fly. I've had good luck with it. For whatever reason, the yellow, orange, and black does seem to trigger strikes. Effective Flashy, but not too flashy. Now, one of the things you can do if you want this to stand out even more is you can put a little bit of ghost hair in the same colors. So when you put down orange bucktail, put just a little bit of orange ghost hair. It'll just give it a little bit more brightness without changing the color. I find that the ghost hair I have matches these colors very well, so it's not changing anything with colors, just how much flash you get. Anyway, I hope that proves useful. It did for me. And again, Richard White signing off. If you have, I'd appreciate it if people wanted to subscribe or like the videos. And again, I don't get money from anyone for any of this. I do it because I enjoy sharing what I do and hope some other people appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and have a good day. Bye-bye. And where's the off button?